The box was a cheap pine keepsake, the kind sold at highway truck stops for $9, with a thin coat of lacquer and a warped lid that didn't close straight. My son Tyler tossed it into a black contractor bag while I lay propped on a wedge pillow in my own living room, knees wrapped in compression bandages and a walker at my elbow. I dug it out 6 minutes after he left. Inside, under a false bottom that only a custodian's fingers would find, was one yellow sheet of legal paper in my late husband Martin's handwriting. Do not trust them. Save yourself. I had no idea that scrap of paper would expose a forged home equity line of credit, void a $164,000 lien, and end with Tyler scrubbing the fryer of a food truck in a shirt that says Home Equity Hustler, while every receipt printed the forgery docket from his criminal case. I am 53 years old. For 31 years, I was the head custodian at Lincoln Elementary School, which is a title that sounds small but means I ran the boilers, the HVAC filters, the floor wax for 140 classrooms, the key control system, the chemical safety logs, and every lock on every door. I can tell when a lock has been jimmied by the scratch pattern on the strike plate, and I can rebuild a sink faucet in 20 minutes. I paid off my $190,000 bungalow in 2019, working every summer shift and every weekend rental cleanup after the school board stopped overtime. I had taken an early retirement buyout that spring because both knees were bone on bone and the district wanted to cut costs. So I was at home with time to recover, but not enough money to make mistakes. My husband Martin was the quiet architect of our finances, the kind of man who kept a locked firebox with every deed, a label on every breaker, and a note in the back of the file cabinet that said, "If the bank asks you to sign, call a lawyer first." That was all the backstory I had time for, because Martin died of an aortic dissection 11 days before my double knee replacement was scheduled. Tyler and Madison did not come to the hospital when Martin died. They arrived the next day in a leased black Escalade, Madison carrying a binder with tabs labeled Estate and Care Plan before the funeral home had even returned Martin's body. Tyler spent most of the visitation in the parking lot with his phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth in that way people do when money is on the line. Madison wore a black dress with a slit up to her hip and asked the funeral director to move the donation box closer to the guest book. At one point, Tyler asked me for a spare house key so he could check the water heater, and I handed it over because my hands were shaking and I did not have the strength to argue. I was foggy with grief and pre-surgical blood thinners, so I let them take over the kitchen, the mail, the phone. That was my first mistake, and it almost cost me everything. The day after the funeral, Tyler was clearing out Martin's workbench in the garage. Martin's workbench had a pegboard with tools arranged by size, little outlines drawn in marker, and drawers with labels in his neat capital letters. Tyler was throwing out anything that didn't have a resale sticker. He held up the little cedar box, shook it near his ear, and said, "Junk," then tossed it into a black contractor bag with old caulk tubes and bent screwdrivers. I waited until he went outside to take a call about a food truck, which I later recognized as the first phone call from the broker. Then I pulled the bag out of the bin. The box was small, maybe 6 inches by 4, with brass hinges and a crack in one corner. Inside were Martin's father's old union pins, a tie clip, and a poker chip from Vegas. Under a layer of felt was a false bottom, a thin sheet of balsa wood cut to fit and painted the same gray as the interior, with a tiny notch on one corner that you could catch with a fingernail. I pressed it, and it popped up. There was a Ziploc bag with one sheet of yellow legal paper. In Martin's handwriting, in blue ballpoint, it read, "Carolyn, if anything happens to me, do not trust them. Save yourself. The house is protected only if you refuse to sign anything. Check the county recorder before any bank paper." I folded it into my bra because that was the one place I knew Tyler and Madison would never look. That note changed the angle of my entire recovery. I still had 2 metal knees waiting to be installed, but I was no longer just a grieving widow in a surgical gown. I was a woman with a warning. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family doesn't get a free pass to rob you blind. 2 days after my double knee replacement, while I was still on a fentanyl patch and a nerve block, Tyler brought a folder to my bedside. I was in my own living room, still propped on the wedge pillow, with a home health aide due in 2 hours. Tyler said it was standard power of attorney paperwork he needed me to sign so he could pay the utility bills while I recovered. Madison stood behind him, arms crossed, nails tapping on her phone. She said, "Carolyn, you need to rest. Let us handle everything." I saw the word quitclaim on one sheet, durable power of attorney on another, and a third document titled Irrevocable Trust Agreement with Copper Creek listed as the trustee. My hands were swollen from the surgery, and I let my fingers tremble. I told them I couldn't read the fine print without my reading glasses, and I didn't know where the glasses were. Tyler got annoyed. He said, "Mom, it's fine, I'm your son, just sign." I said my hand was too shaky and I needed more pain medication. I let my head loll and said the pain pill was making me see double, which was a lie but a useful one. Tyler's jaw tightened. Madison said, "We'll take them home and come back." They did take them home, but I had already noticed that the quitclaim deed had a notary block with no signature line for a witness, which is a red flag in our state. That night, they moved me into their rented 4-bedroom in a subdivision called Copper Creek. They said it was for round-the-clock care, but it was really to isolate me from my neighbors, my mail, and the house phone. I played weak and foggy. I let them think the painkillers had made me confused. I never signed anything. They took my house keys, but I had hidden a spare in a magnetic box under the breaker panel outside because Martin had taught me years ago to keep one there. I also kept my phone on me, hidden under the waistband of my sweatpants, which was uncomfortable but necessary. That was my first small win. The next morning, Tyler tried again. He brought a single page with a red tab that said signature required and put a pen in my hand. He said it was a release for the visiting nurse. I saw the letters IRS at the top and let my head loll to one side. I asked if he had seen my glasses, my mouth slack. Madison said, "Maybe we wait until the sedatives wear off." Tyler snapped, "We don't have time to wait, the bank has already called twice." He said the word bank in front of me, and then his face went smooth like a lid closing. He took the paper back and said, "Get some rest, Mom, we'll try tomorrow." I made a mental note. The bank had already called twice. I had not signed anything, but the clock was ticking for them. They moved me to Copper Creek that afternoon. The guest room was on the first floor, with a lock on the outside and a baby monitor on the nightstand. Madison said it was so they could hear me if I fell. I said thank you and asked for a glass of water. In the coming days, I learned their routines. Tyler took phone calls on the back deck, his voice low and hard. Through the sliding glass door, I heard words like draw period, lien priority, and balloon payment. I started keeping a small notebook in the pocket of my robe, writing down every word he said. Madison ordered a $4,000 sectional and a new SUV with leather seats. She told me it was from her bonus. The mail came in piles on the kitchen counter, and I saw collection notices from a food truck equipment supplier, a commercial kitchen rental company, and a custom wrap shop. Tyler said he was launching a food truck brand called Home Equity Hustle, which I later understood was a joke he thought no one would get. Every time I asked about my own mail, Madison said, "Oh, I forwarded it to the new address, it hasn't come yet." I knew that was a lie. I started counting the days. A week into my stay, Tyler brought a mobile notary to my room. She was a young woman named Ashley from a rotation service, and she looked tired, like she had been pulled out of a strip mall office. Tyler told me he needed a fresh power of attorney because the old one had expired. He held my arm and tried to guide my hand. The notary asked for a government-issued identification and a face-to-face acknowledgement. Tyler said I didn't have my purse. She said she couldn't proceed without seeing my original Social Security card or passport. Tyler got angry, gave her $20 for the trip, and told her to leave. I pretended to sleep through all of it, but I kept my ears open. That night I understood that they were getting desperate enough to try legitimate channels, which meant the forged one was already in trouble. I knew then that a real notary would refuse, and Tyler would be forced to either forge another stamp or push me harder. I also noticed he had left the original folder on the kitchen counter, so I waited until he went to the bathroom. Then I used my phone to take a quick photo of the top page. It was a copy of a quitclaim deed from me to Tyler, with my signature already on it, smooth and machine perfect. That photo would later join the evidence pile. The kitchen faucet began to leak on a Tuesday. Tyler stood in front of it with a plumber on speakerphone, arguing about a $300 emergency call. I wheeled my walker over and asked for a basin wrench. He said, "What's that?" I shut off the angle stops under the sink, drained the residual pressure by opening the faucet, pulled the old cartridge with a pair of channel locks, packed the new one with silicone grease, and had the water running in 20 minutes. I also replaced the O-rings on the supply line connections because I could see they were dry-rotted. Madison looked at me like I had performed open-heart surgery. While I was under there, I noticed a torn piece of paper wedged behind the P-trap, which is a sign that someone had tried to flush documents down the kitchen disposal, but missed a piece. It was a bank letterhead with the words Mortgage Fraud Review printed across the top. I palmed it and slipped it into my sock, then finished the faucet so they wouldn't notice. That night, I read it in the bathroom with the water running so no one would hear the paper crinkle. It was a letter from a bank asking Tyler to provide the original notary certificate for a home equity line of credit secured by a property on Maple Street, my property. The letter said the loan had been flagged for fraud review because the notary stamp did not match state records. I folded it and hid it inside the lining of my walker's seat cushion. That tear was not the only evidence. The following week, Tyler and Madison spent an evening shredding papers in the hall closet office, which they had converted from a coat closet. I heard the crosscut shredder whine for 20 minutes. The shredder had a 10-sheet capacity and a bin that held about 3 gallons of confetti. They ran it for 20 minutes straight, which means they destroyed a ream of documents. When they left for a branding consultation with a graphic designer named Jax, I went to the garage and pulled the shredder bag from the bin. I carried it back to my room inside an old pillowcase, and I locked the bathroom door so I could work without being seen. For 3 nights, I worked at a card table with a roll of clear packing tape and a small LED desk lamp I had bought with cash at the pharmacy. I sorted the strips by color and paperweight. Because bank statements are on heavier paper than ordinary copy paper, and the fonts are usually a specific shade of navy. I laid them out edge to edge on a sheet of wax paper, and I used the tape like a hinge to hold the pieces together. It was slow, but I had spent decades matching damaged floor tile patterns, and my fingers knew how to see a picture in broken pieces. I reconstructed a bank statement showing the $164,000 draw in 2 tranches, $90,000 to a truck broker, $50,000 as a cashier's check to Home Equity Hustle LLC, and $24,000 wired to a payday lender. I also reconstructed an email order confirmation from a company called Custom Stamp Pros. And the receipt was for a custom notary stamp with the name Denise Aucaffer, Notary Public, and the commission number 08-2017-4451. The shipping address was T. Whitfield at 472 Copper Creek Lane, and the order date was 3 days after Martin died. I photographed everything with my phone, then reshredded the strips and flushed them down the toilet in small batches so no one would find the taped sheets. Then I went for the locked filing cabinet. I knew from my years as a custodian that most file cabinet locks are wafer locks, 4 pins, light tension, and you can open them with a tension wrench and a rake pick. I made a tension wrench from a windshield wiper insert in the garage, and I bent a bobby pin into a small hook using the edge of the nightstand. I practiced on the bathroom door lock for an hour, listening for the click of each pin setting against the shear line. The bathroom lock was a cheap privacy set with only 4 wafers, so it was easy. The file cabinet in the hall closet had 6 wafers, and the keyway was narrower. I used light tension and a backhand-forth raking motion, and I felt the core turn after 9 minutes. My old hands were shaking, but I got it open. Inside was a folder labeled Whitfield Hellock with a red tab. I sat on the floor and read it cover to cover. There was a copy of a home equity line of credit agreement dated 11 days after Martin died. It listed me as the sole borrower. The credit limit was $164,000. The draw period was 10 years, interest only, with a variable rate tied to the prime rate plus 2.5% and a balloon payment at the end. The loan purpose was listed as home improvement, but the draw schedule showed 2 immediate wire transfers, $90,000 to a truck broker for used food truck, $40,000 to a custom wrap shop, and $24,000 to a payday lender called Quick Cash Plus. The rest had gone to pay off their own credit cards and a personal loan. I have written my name on custodial supply orders for 31 years. My real signature has a hitch in the C, like a skip in a floor buffer when the pad is worn uneven. The signature on that document was smooth, machine perfect, no hitch. It looked like someone had practiced it from a scan copy, but couldn't reproduce the natural tremor. The notary stamp was a red flag. I know notary stamps require a commission number and sometimes an embossed seal depending on the state. This one had the name Denise Aucaffer and a commission number 08-2017-4451. I typed that into the Secretary of State notary database on my phone, right there on the closet floor with my back against the wall. Denise Aucaffer was a real notary, but her commission had expired in 2017, and she lived in a different county. The stamp on this document had a serial number that the database showed as canceled in 2015 for lost or stolen. The notary signature was also misspelled in 2 places, once as Denise Aucaffer, and once as Denise Aucaffer with a squiggle that didn't match any letter. I photographed everything with my phone, put the folder back exactly as I found it, and relocked the cabinet. Then I checked the drawer for a false bottom of my own. Nothing, but I had enough. I also found a bill of sale for a used food truck, a 2007 Chevy P30, purchased at auction for $52,000. The VIN was listed. There were receipts for a commercial kitchen lease, a point-of-sale system, and a custom wrap with the name Home Equity Hustle. They had spent $40,000 on branding and debt payments. The rest had gone to pay off their own credit cards and a personal loan from a payday lender. I had never signed any of it. I also found a copy of the power of attorney Tyler had used, and it was dated the same week Martin died. My signature on that document had the same too smooth look. The notary on that one was also Denise Aucaffer, same fake stamp. I now had the complete paper trail. That night I used the phone under my blanket to open the county recorder's website. I typed in my property address. There were 3 recordings. The first was Martin's death certificate. The second was the forged power of attorney, recorded 3 days after he died. The third was the durable power of attorney restriction and affidavit, recorded 2 years earlier. I read the restriction twice. It said any power of attorney bearing my name is void for real estate unless the principal appears in person at the recorder's office and submits a thumbprint, a physician's letter, and a video. The forged POA had a notary stamp but no thumbprint and no video. Tyler had recorded it anyway, probably hoping the bank wouldn't check. He was wrong. I remembered the weekend Martin had filed it. He never said exactly what made him suspicious, but he came home from the bank one afternoon with his jaw tight and said, "Tyler asked me to co-sign for $40,000. I told him no. He needs to learn that our house is not his business capital." That weekend, Martin drove me to the county recorder's office and we both signed the restriction. I had mostly forgotten about it until that night. It was Martin's dead man's switch, filed years before the fraud, waiting quietly in the public record for anyone who bothered to look. The HELOC application listed my income as $72,000 a year from my custodian pension and Social Security. It said my monthly debts were $400, but the bank never verified my identity with a call. The loan officer, Greg, later admitted he didn't check the recorded restrictions because he was behind on his quarterly quota. The underwriter approved the loan based on a scanned copy of my driver's license, which Tyler had taken from my purse during surgery. The address on the application was my own, but the mailing address was Tyler's Copper Creek house. That's how the bank statements and fraud review letters went to him, not to me. He intercepted everything. After I had photos and the torn letter and the reconstructed shreds, I needed an ally on the inside. I called the number on the mortgage fraud review letter from the bathroom with the shower running. It connected me to a compliance officer named Renee Duval. I told her my name and address and said I believed a fraudulent HELOC had been taken out in my name while I was medically incapacitated. Renee paused, then said, "MS, Whitfield, we have been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. The letters went to the property address. Did anyone forward them?" I told her no. She said the loan had been flagged for possible notary fraud and elder financial exploitation. She asked if I had signed the loan. I said no, and I could prove it. She asked me to come to the bank, but I said I was being watched and could not leave without them. She said she would set up a meeting. Then she told me something that made my chest go still. She said, "Your husband recorded a document with the county recorder 2 years ago. It's a durable power of attorney restriction and affidavit. It says any power of attorney executed by you is invalid for real property transfers or financial encumbrances unless accompanied by a notarized physician's letter stating you are competent, a thumbprint in ink, and a video recording of the signing. The forged POA your son used has none of that." I closed my eyes. Martin had seen it coming. He had built a dead man's switch. The house could not be touched without me physically present, competent, and willing. The bank had missed it because the loan officer didn't check the recorded restrictions, and the notary verification was done by a junior processor who just matched the name to a database entry and didn't notice the expired commission and the canceled serial number. Renee said the loan would be frozen immediately, and the bank would file a suspicious activity report with FinCEN. She asked me to bring the original box with Martin's note and the photos I had taken. I said I would. She also said the FBI might get involved because the bank was FDIC insured and the fraud crossed state lines through the wire transfer. That was when I knew Tyler and Madison were not just bad family, they were federal criminals. I arranged to meet Renee at the pharmacy, where I had physical therapy on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tyler dropped me off and circled the block, pretending to wait for a prescription. I gave her a manila envelope with printed photos and a copy of the yellow note from Martin. Renee said the bank needed the originals for the fraud investigation, but copies were enough to start the freeze. I told her I had the originals in my walker bag and would bring them to the final meeting. She said the bank's fraud monitoring system had already flagged the loan because the notary serial number didn't match the state format, and the compliance team was preparing a suspicious activity report. She asked me to keep pretending I didn't know, to let Tyler and Madison believe I was still foggy and compliant. She said the bank needed one more thing, a face-to-face refusal in front of a loan officer, so the institution could document the fraud on record and void the lien without any legal ambiguity. I told her I could do that. She also gave me the phone number of Detective Marcus Bell from the Financial Crimes Unit and told me to call if I ever felt unsafe. I kept that number written in pencil on the inside of my ankle brace because I knew Tyler would never check there. I waited 4 days. I had heard Tyler on the phone saying the bank needed a face-to-face signature to cure the loan, and he was desperate. That morning, I drank a glass of water, took a deep breath, and put a small digital voice recorder in the pocket of my robe. I walked into the front hall. I grabbed the edge of the console table and let myself collapse. I hit the tile hard, clawed at my chest, and made a sound like a drowning animal. Tyler came out of the office holding a navy folder. He looked at me on the floor, then looked at the folder, then stepped over my legs. He said, "Madison, we're late, get the keys." Madison walked around me, looked down, and said, "She's always dramatic." They left me on the tile. I lay there for 20 minutes, listening to the garage door close and the refrigerator hum. I could feel the cold tile under my cheek and the ache in my new knees. The recorder in my pocket caught every word. Then I got up, checked my pulse, and packed my bag. That was the moment every remaining drop of family loyalty I had was extinguished. I would not call them family again. They were now just two people who had committed fraud and left me to die. I texted Renee from the bathroom and told her it was time. That afternoon, Tyler came home and told me we were going to run errands. He helped me into the back seat of Madison's SUV, and I let him. He drove to a bank branch on Court Street. He said, "Mom, there's a paperwork error on the house. You just need to sign one thing and it's fixed." Madison said, "It's nothing, just a formality." I said okay, and I let them walk me into the bank. I had the cedar box in my walker bag, the original note folded inside, and the digital voice recorder running in my bra. The bank officer, a man named Greg who had approved the original loan, led us to a small office. On the desk was a document labeled ratification and consent to encumber. Greg said all I needed to do was sign and put my thumbprint. Tyler leaned over and said, "Mom, just sign it." I looked at the document. It had my forged signature already on the first page and a blank line for a new signature. I looked up at Greg and asked, "Can you show me the original notary certificate for this loan?" Greg's face went flat. He said, "The original certificate is on file, ma'am." I said, "Then you won't mind if I compare the commission number to the state database." I pulled out my phone and read the number from the fake stamp. Denise Aucaffer, commission number 08-2017-4451. Her commission expired in 2017. The serial number on the stamp was canceled in 2015 for lost or stolen, and the signature on the loan isn't mine. I have a hitch in my C. Tyler's face went from red to white. Madison started to stand up. Then I said the words I had practiced in the bathroom mirror. I spent 31 years cleaning up other people's messes. I am not signing my house away to cover yours. At that exact moment, Renee opened the office door with 2 bank security officers and Detective Marcus Bell from the Financial Crimes Unit. The bank's fraud monitoring system had already locked the line of credit that morning, triggered by the suspicious activity report. The county recorder's restriction from Martin automatically invalidated the forged POA, so any signature I gave today would be legally meaningless. Tyler tried to push past the security guard, but he didn't get far. Madison started crying and said she didn't know what was going on. The detective read them their rights. Greg was asked to step into a back office for questioning. I sat in that chair, palms sweating, and watched the whole house of cards fall in a quiet bank branch on a Thursday afternoon. I did not yell. I did not swing. I just refused, and the system Martin had built did the rest. Tyler and Madison were arrested and booked on state charges that afternoon, and federal charges followed within 2 weeks. Tyler was charged with bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, notary fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Madison was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and aiding and abetting the fraud. Tyler pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Madison pleaded guilty and got 18 months plus 5 years of supervised release. The bank voided the lien within 60 days. The notary, it turned out, was just a name Tyler had bought from a fake stamp website. He had never met her. The food truck, bought with stolen funds, was seized by the court as criminal property and then turned over to me as restitution. I stood in front of that truck for a long time in the bank's impound lot. It was a 2007 Chevy P30 with a griddle, a fryer, a prep table, and a custom wrap that said Home Equity Hustle in gold letters. I almost sold it. Then I thought about Martin and his note. I decided to keep it. I cleaned the grease trap, replaced the fire suppression system, passed the health inspection, and hired a chef named Rosa who had worked in the school cafeteria. The truck needed a new water heater, a vent hood cleaning, and a gas pressure adjustment on the fryer. I knew how to read the inspection report because I had maintained the school kitchen's hood system for 10 years. I pulled the burner tubes, cleaned the orifices with a wire brush, used a manometer to check the gas pressure at 3.5 inches of water column, and adjusted the regulator until the flame burned blue with a sharp inner cone. I replaced the anode rod in the water heater, repacked the grease trap with enzyme cleaner, and replaced the gray water tank's dump valve. Rosa took care of the food. I took care of the permits, the payroll, and the maintenance. I named the truck Equity of Betrayal Grill. The first time I flipped the open sign, I stood in the morning light and felt something I hadn't felt in months. I was the one holding the pen. Tyler works 4 shifts a week now, supervised by a probation officer named Officer DeLeon who checks in at random. The shirt is part of his court-ordered public acknowledgement of his crime. It says Home Equity Hustler in black block letters. He's not allowed to touch the cash drawer or the payment terminal. He scrubs the fryer, mops the floors, and hands out napkins. The first week, he didn't look me in the eye. The second week, he tried to apologize. I told him to scrape the grill. Every receipt that prints from my point-of-sale system includes the forgery docket, the case number, the forged amount, the fake notary serial number, and the line. This meal was paid for with clean money. I spent an afternoon with the point-of-sale manual, changing the receipt footer from "Thank you for your business" to a 3-line legal statement using the printer's ESC/POS commands. Customers ask about it sometimes. I tell them the truth in 2 sentences, and then I hand them their fries. Martin had seen all of it. He couldn't stop Tyler from trying, but he made sure the house was locked to him in a way no forged signature could open. He knew that the only person who could ever let them take the house was me, and he made sure I would have a written warning and a recorded obstacle. He didn't leave me a fortune. He left me a lock. I have spent 31 years learning that most messes are made by people who never learn to clean up after themselves. Integrity is just doing the right thing when no one is watching, and boundaries are the locks you install before somebody tries the door. I didn't need to become someone else to win. I just needed to remember that I was never just a custodian. I was the one who knew how to spot a mess before it spread, and I knew how to clean it up for good. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? If this story hit home, hit like and subscribe for more tales of family betrayal and hard-earned justice. Remember, not all family is blood, and not all blood is family. I'll see you in the next one.